Hey, good morning, everybody. Sarasota Tim coming to you from beautiful Sarasota, Bradenton, Florida. Welcome back to another morning chat and coffee time. Let's pour us a cup. I've already got the pot made, but it is not hot. We'll have to nuke it. Let's just pour us some here. We got the McDonald's coffee going on, of course. What else? So how you 111,614 absolute beautiful souls doing this morning? I hope you're all doing really good. Thanks for tuning in to another video. Today we're going to be talking about, I'm skipping the 60s. I made a video the other day about life in the 50s. I found it very intriguing when I watched it on the internet about how life began. I guess, after coming out of the Depression and the 40s and things like that, the 50s were really a big time in America. In the 60s, there was a lot of similarity because life was slow then. And so things just sort of continued to grow on the things that people were doing in the 50s. So when I watched some of the stuff on the internet about the 60s, I said, he's saying a lot of the things that he just said about the 50s. So I said, I want something a little bit more different. And while there was definitely changes in the 60s, political and different bigger things like that, just kind of focusing on how we lived and what we made and what we did was similar. And it wasn't until the next decade when I grew up in the 70s that things really, hit my memory and maybe a lot of yours, because I think a lot of you out there are my age. But before we get into it, let's get some coffee brewing up here. Get the cream out. Last night, I did make my steak. I didn't video it. You've seen it before. It did start to rain when I got back from Walmart, so I wasn't able to use any of my outdoor cooking things. I had to smell up the camper again, heat up my stainless steel pan, really hot, with some avocado oil, butter and garlic, and I made the best ribeye steak you ever ate in your life. I mean, it was good. And what made it really good, I think I switched over to I get two of these as a gift from a subscriber, from Jamie. And it must have been, I don't know, they're very, very sharp. It must have been the one I haven't used yet. Or the steak with the salt thing that I did that tenderized it. I literally just laid this on top and pulled it, and it just dropped through that steak. It was amazing. So I enjoyed a nice steak last night. Get this coffee out here. I'm sure it's plenty hot. Come on in here a little closer. I got you on back there ways. How's this? Is it too close? Hey, I got the Super Crusher right outside the window. I'm a minimalist, I got one vehicle, one camper. I don't have two. I had two campers at one time. I had two cars at one time. Or vehicles, I should say. Sure did. But no more. I even have just me now. That's all I got. Me, that truck, and this camper, clothes on my back, and a pocket full of hundreds. So folks, life can be simple, can be challenging. It can be a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And it has been a lot of different things to all of us over our lifespan. And I'm talking about growing up, how things were when you were a kid, how things were when you were a teenager, and then as a young adult, and then you're working, and then now maybe you're retired. And so you go through all these changes just in your own aging. And then what happens? You witness and look back and even forget how simpler, easier, and less everything was when you go back in your life. I just wonder, do your grandchildren today, hold on. Folks, that is slurpable McDonald's coffee, baby. with that heavy whipping cream. And I got to tell you, that's the best cup of coffee I've ever drank in my life. Man, that's good coffee. Got you in there a little close. Back up. Back up off of me. Get out of my grill. So we grew up and we look back and we forget because we just kind of keep morphing into to today's world and things we're listening to, and it's moving so fast. That's the problem. It's very difficult unless you see something, unless someone reminds you, which is what we're going to do right now. Oh yeah, man, remember that? And it's just that things are just moving at light speed today that you can't remember last year, much less 2 or 3 decades ago. But it is nice to, ponder those memories and look back. Photos and videos on YouTube and things you can find to remember. And we're going to do just that right now. After just one more sip of coffee. One of my subscribers was talking about a percolator. And I had bought one at Walmart at Ozark Trail in the camping section that you put on top of the gas stove, the old school. But for whatever reason, it wouldn't work. Something was wrong with it. It would never percolate. That water would boil on the inside of it, but it would never come up through the stem and then through the little glass globe, whatever they call that. So I bought forgot the brands, one of the most popular brands at Walmart, an electric. And it was pretty cool. I don't know what happened to it. You get the smell of the coffee. And that was another thing, going back in time. You remember the smell of a percolator growing up? If your mom or dad made coffee in the morning, they used one of those. I don't know if Mr. Coffee was around then. That's another thing. I didn't write that down in my notes, but that kind of is something that, we used where they had Sanka and all these instant coffees, and then I think that people maybe percolated coffee. But anyway, let's get into the video. I hope and pray that everybody has a great day today. That after the video and you begin your day, or before you even started watching this, you've made your bed already. You said some prayers. You've given appreciation to God for everything you have, and that you can be a light today in this dark world that we live in. That you can be a shining light and you can make a difference and be kind, chat somebody up, make some compliments. I told a story here. We'll get to the video in a minute. I told a story here recently. I just can't forget it. Every time I go to the mall now and I walk, I go past this one shoe store that's on the top floor. I always look in there. I'm a shoe guy. And I think about this young kid. He was like 12 or 13. He wasn't even 14 or 15, I don't believe. And he come walking out of the shoe store. He passed me. I mean, it was just like that. And he says, "I like your shoes." And just kept walking. And that wasn't even like a pause for a moment and talk a little bit and make a compliment. And I never forgot it. And so when you see somebody today, you can pay a compliment about their car, their clothing, their shoes, their watch, anything that they take pride in that you recognize, and to build their self-esteem. Or just other conversations. If you have if it's a moment in the parking lot, you talk to somebody and they're willing to chat with you for a second, ask them about themselves, where they're from. People love to talk about themselves. And when you show interest in people, and they don't normally get that. Today, people don't even look at each other. They don't, But there's a lot of kindness in the world. Express it. I don't mean to be going on about this because we got another video we're trying to make here. But it really is important that you remember that every day when you go out, you're going to see people. And treat them like you want to be treated. Look at them in the eye, give a smile, make a compliment, say hello. Use manners. Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Yes, sir, no, sir. Act like, show that you were raised right and you're respectful and you're professional and you're kind. You're harmless. You're the kind of person they could trust and they enjoyed speaking to. Be somebody that somebody will remember that day. All right, let's get to the video. Oh, where's my glasses? First, let's have another swallow of this delicious coffee. Folks, that is the best cup of coffee I've ever drank in my life. I intentionally waited to make this video to have my second cup. I did have one already. You know, I got to have my wake up. Let me get my glasses. Sorry about that. They're right here. I've got them everywhere. Make sure they're clean. These are not clean. You want to wear glasses, but you want to be able to see out of them. I guess I could have done this before. You could have used some of my vinegar. So I put that vinegar out last night. Oh, by the way, when I went to Walmart last night, I made a Walmart video. I come out of there with a bottle of vinegar, a couple of pair of shorts, and some hamburger meat for $100. I mean, yeah, I got a few more things, but it's really ridiculous. And that's what, you know, we'll talk about in this video about the 70s, the cost of living. And I mean, how much higher can it get? And without, you know, increased wages. And how are people supposed to pay $30, $40, $50 an hour to employees without raising their prices really high? And then who's going to come in and pay, you know, $10 for a loaf of bread? It's really a hamster wheel. I got to have some more of this coffee. The air conditioning's on. I'm all mic'd up. Weighed in this morning at 176. Yesterday I was saying it was 175.8 or something, but so holding in there. I didn't expect much difference today. We'll get out and run. All right, life in the 70s. Well, the first thing we remember was the oil crisis. Cars were large and gas prices went way up and there were long lines. And when you were in line for gas, I mean, lines were ridiculous, right? Like, same thing we still get today in a hurricane, which we have one coming. I don't know if it's going to come here, but there's one that they're predicting there will be a hurricane here in a couple of days that just came off of Africa. First one of 2025. But anyway, you get these lines in the 70s because the gas was a shortage. No hurricane, just a shortage. And you shut your car off, you rolled your windows down. You had your big long boat, your big long V8, your long hood, and you got gas. And according to what I read on the internet, is you didn't go straight home, you celebrated. You know, you got you a tank of gas. Skipping around here, this is just some of the things that they were talking about online. Digital watches came out. Now, do you remember like a Casio or whatever, and you could press a button and that red, it was red, LED would come on and give you the time. And you were amazed by that. And you didn't just, if somebody asked you the time or whatever, you showed them time. And if it had a stopwatch on it, forget about it. The world did feel smaller, and people, I can't read my own writing there. Large cars had bench seats. You could literally slide over into your siblings over on the seat, the vinyl bench seat. There was no cup holders. There was nothing. You go around a corner, if you didn't hang on to that wheel, you might be over in the passenger side. No seat belts, nothing. No cup holders. In the 70s, a big thing in homes was shag carpeting. And it didn't match anything, but yet it went with everything. People tried to put runners down. It was the hardest thing in the world to vacuum and clean, and everything got lost in it. And it was just, nobody knew why, but everybody had it. Remember that? Paneling on the walls. People were installing paneling. You go down to one of the home goods store. I don't even think we had Home Depot and Lowe's yet. They would buy paneling and panel the walls. Everything was dark, like brown shag and brown paneling. That was the 70s though. And it was also bright colors when it comes to clothing, which we'll talk about here in a second. A house cost 17 grand in the beginning of the 70s, and by the mid 70s, they had doubled. Yep, you're already in the 30-something thousand range. It's a long way from when we were talking the other day of houses at 3 grand in the 50s. But you got to remember, it's all relative, right? How much money people were making. I think they were making like $3,000 a year. A year! People make that a week now. Definitely a month, and that's not much. 8-track music players were in all the cars. You'd put it in, and man, I'm telling you, you had all these 8 tracks everywhere. They were all over the floor. You started buying bags. You had, now I'm going to elaborate on this because I didn't learn this on the internet. I'm just remembering my own self that when I started driving, big old giant things, you know, and you stick them in, and man, we would call it eating it. If it ate the tape, you would just pray that you could wiggle it or move it and get it out of there without all that 8-track tape being all wrapped up inside your 8-track player. But you could change tracks. Oh man, 8 tracks before cassettes. 8-track players. Man, they were really a cumbersome to carry around, weren't they? Big old giant things, and had so many of them. CB radios. It wasn't just for truckers anymore. Everybody had one in their car, and it was social media before social media. You know, you learned the lingo, you got on there, and you hope somebody was on channel 19, and you talk to them. You learn, like I said, the lingo, breaker, copy, you know, break 19 and all that kind of stuff. I used to have one. I used to speak on them. I actually had one on my Honda Goldwing motorcycle that they used to put standard, and then they made it optional. It was like $700 radio to put on a motorcycle. But I used it to talk to the truckers to find out where the Smokies were, where the Bears, the police. Hey, it was better than any radar detector because eyes on the ground, man. They only work within line of sight or within a certain distance, so you couldn't, you know, speak on them like a cell phone anywhere. But wherever some good buddy was, you could just talk him up. Tab and Fresca came out, diet drinks, and it was like a drink of the future. And you didn't understand it, you didn't know what was inside of it, but we drank them. I personally didn't like the taste of them. Now, we all know the biggest thing in the 70s was bell-bottom pants. Bell-bottoms, baby. Yeah, some of them were really flared out, but everything had a little flare at the bottom. I had a pair of Dingo boots. If you don't know what that is, it was a square-toe boot. Came up pretty high, too, underneath the pants. And it had that little ring on the side of the boot at the bottom with the strap that ran across the top of your foot of the boot, and those were really cool. But bell bottoms, man, men, women, all wore them. And speaking of shoes, do you remember? I got it written on here. I don't want to mention it a second time, but Earth shoes, man, they looked weird, but everybody was buying them, so everybody wore them, and they were very weird looking. There was another shoe called, I don't know if you, let me know in the comments, have you ever heard of these? They were a suede looking shoe with like 2 lace holes. You tied them. They were a little high up on your ankle, but not above the ankle, and they were called Wallabies. Now that is a shoe I remember everybody wearing. I even saw a pair the other day, and I still say it's the ugliest shoe ever made. Wallabies. They look like something between a moccasin and, I don't know, a chamois. How about mood rings? Now, I never had one, but when I was watching the internet about these, apparently they did change color, mostly like a brown or something. But when it would change to a blue or a green, people thought that they, were really knowing something about them. I never had one, but I do remember hearing about them. Moon rocks, mood rings. Uh-huh. And then boom boxes came out. People were walking around instead of earbuds and headphones and like we have today with our cell phones, and you can't even hardly see them. We had these big boom boxes. You'd either carry it by your side or put it up on your shoulder, two big speakers. You'd annoy the neighbors. Go down to the beach with it, just walking down the sidewalk. They were a fad for a while. Big boom boxes, cassette players playing all that music. It could be disco, rock and roll, rap, hip hop. And speaking of that, on the internet when they showed this, now this takes me back to my time. Dark Side of the Moon, a Pink Floyd album. You'd sit there with your headphones on, you'd lay down on the floor, and you'd hear that sound and the echo voices, and it seemed like it was out in space. I mean, just think about that song. I know you know it. And think about all the different parts of it. And I could kind of get into listening to it right now with some headphones. Just sit back in my chair, close my eyes, and really, really get into it. You talk about something that takes me back to my high school days. It is Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon, Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin, all of those bands. I mean, music was big to us that grew up in the 70s. Music was big in the 50s and the 60s, but it changed. And Dark Side of the Moon was forever be familiar in your mind. Lava Lamp. Now, while I didn't have one, I remember seeing them, and they are, hypnotic, kind of like having an aquarium, something you can stare at. You watch this thing bubble up through that somewhat sort of thick-looking water, and it would just, release. Now, a quick story on me, it's not a lava lamp, but I had a black light. And I had a room in the garage in Lake Worth, Florida that my dad had built me, one corner of the garage. Take a garage and then cut off a little corner over there in the back. And he put some 2x4s up and some paneling. And I had a little doorway that I went in. And guess what? I hung beads. You remember the beads you'd go through to go through a doorway? I had a long string of beads from the doorway top all the way to the floor. They were different colors, strands of beads. And then what I did, because I'm not an artist, I got no skill except for talking. I just took a pencil and I just kind of went like this all over the walls, the drywall, in the two walls that I had, the back wall of the garage and this side wall. And I got fluorescent glow-in-the-dark paint. And I use everything from a little wider brush to the real skinny ones. And I painted in these little loops and circles that I made. It took me a long time, days and weeks. I'd work on it. And I had a 4-foot black light. I'm sure a lot of you had black lights. And you would go in, man, this is taking me back right now. And you turn it on, you'd be in the room by yourself. You got your bell bottoms, you got your black light, you got your beads hanging. You're listening to some Led Zeppelin or Pink Floyd, and you're glowing. And you are the 70s. I mean, you really feel something and you're experiencing something, and it's pretty darn trippy, man. Pretty darn trippy. Speaking of trippy and using those words, there were words like far out, man. And far out meant like, wow. And when you saw something that was far out and you said that, these expressions started to come into play too. I don't know about groovy. I think it was probably in the 60s. But far out was definitely used a lot. Far out, man. The bicentennial in 1976 was a big deal. We all gathered around the TV and watched it, and there was all kinds of stuff about it. It was like, the birthday, and it was a big one, right? It was a big one, the bicentennial. I was, and you were fortunate enough to be invited, and it was one of the big deals, and that happened in 1976. Star Wars came out. People went to see it, and man, that was futuristic, right? This is why they made so many of them. Star Wars came out. You went to the movie theater, and you didn't know why, but your friend kept telling you that it was far out. And so to shut him up, you finally went and saw it. And so many people became Star Wars freaks. Yeah, it really made you feel like you were in the future. You know, we used to watch science fiction movies all the time. I don't care for them anymore. It's not my favorite genre by any measure, to be honest with you. I look at them, they're kind of like silly. But when you were looking at those things in the 70s, and you were like, are they going to really have that in the future? You know, the way they were dressed and the machines and all the little lights on the machine and the spaceships and everything. It was fascinating to dream about. Today, it's like, hey, you know, if we hear about it, look, we're going to the moon now. We got astronauts living up there for a year or two. No big deal. Income was under 10 grand, about 9 grand a year, and in the beginning of the 70s. By the end of the 70s, income jumped to 20 grand a year. It doubled. So that's amazing. I went to school the whole time. I wasn't an earner until the very end of the 70s, where I was already out of school. I quit school and I went to California and I got married, and we had a child, and I was 17 years old, and I was changing tires for a while at a tire place, split rims and just changing tires. I worked at a 20/20 machine, or a 10/10 they called it. Those are what they put the tires on to break them off the rims. And then I got in the car business in 76 or 7. And so when I answered the ad to be a car salesman at 17 years old, it said make $3,000 this month if you're on the ball. And I thought, man, if I can make half of that, you know, I'm rich. And here I am, this young kid. So they were promising some high income. Now that was on commission and sales, which people could have made a lot of money over the average income in any decade in sales and commissions if you were a very productive salesperson. But yeah, I started working in the late 70s, mid to late 70s. And then people were starting to buy small cars. I remember when I got in the car business, people were waiting 6 months for a Honda CVCC, a Honda Civic. Everybody was starting to buy these Hondas and Toyotas, and they were small cars, and they were Japanese, and they were promising high fuel economy, numbers we never heard of before. Before that, it was all about LTDs and Grand Marquis and Chevy Impalas and Caprices and other big V8, long hooded, fantastic driving, smooth floaters, baby, boats. But people started buying the small cars. Casey Kasem was doing the countdown of the top 40 every week, and it was, if you never heard of that, then you just weren't awake. So that was a big deal. That was a big deal. Pong came out. All right, now we're getting into the digital world, the computers, and a game came out where it was 2 paddles and a ball in the middle, and beep, beep, and you just bounce it back and forth. And there was nothing entertaining about it. It was black and white, but yet you could sit there and play it for hours. I think it would get a little faster or something to, you know, get your skill level up. But Pong came out. And then typewriters were not electric. And in those days, I took typing in high school. I actually did. ASDFJKL semicolon. And it's really one of the trades, like we talked about the other day. If you took mechanics, welding, wood shop, and things like that, that had to stick with men and women. I guess it was mostly boys in those days that were interested in that. Or the cooking and the typing was actually more women were in the, girls were in the typing class. One of the reasons I joined it. But it stuck with me. And now with the computers and the keyboards, I don't sit and do like this. I can actually type. I never forgot, and I'm pretty good at it. So it really is important that besides math and English and things like that, which are obviously the staple of education, trades should be taught, I believe, in school. Now, I know the internal combustion engine of a car today, you raise the hood, and it's like looking at the inside of a watch. There's so much stuff in there now versus just an open engine compartment with something you can take a pair of pliers and a screwdriver and fix. But you can still learn about the modern engines today, and certainly carpentry, wood shop, cooking, and things like that. They should be trades in school. Now, where was I going? Oh yeah, typewriters. Because they weren't electric, and I remember when they came out, I started out with the manual. You had to press way down, and you heard that familiar sound. Then you reach up, and you pull that thing over. And, if you got pretty good, I got to 80 words a minute. And you got pretty good with it. And then, of course, when you made a mistake, you had to get out that white paper and bring it backspace, and put that same letter over to correct your errors. And then, I forgot what they call them. There were an electric ball typewriter that came out that was introduced in my class. We really thought this was cool. Man, you weren't having to press any effort down the key. You just touched it, and this ball with all these letters around it came up and hit the paper. And that's when I think I got to 80 words a minute, because that was a lot easier. I don't think I ever got that fast with the manual, but there was something satisfying about finishing the paper and then ripping it out of the, whatever they call that there where the paper goes in. How about putting it in, right? And winding it up and leveling it. All these things we had to learn to get the key to hit right on the line. Yeah, man. Just talking about it takes me back to my typing class. All right, we're going to turn the page here. We wrote letters. We didn't write emails. We actually got out a nice piece of paper and a pen, and we practiced our cursive writing and our perfect loops. And I'm left-handed, so I have to push my hand across instead of, I've always been so envious of people that write right-handed. It's just such a natural glide. You're pulling your hand away as the letters flow off the end of your pencil or pen. And I'm having to push my hand, and a lot of times my hand's going to smear what I just wrote, and I'm just not a very good writer. I'm not a bad writer, if I take my time. But if I try to just do it like a right-handed person, it doesn't look good. So I print a lot. I'm a pretty good printer. But we wrote letters, and we went to the mailbox, and you licked a stamp, you stuck it on there, and it was going to be a few days before they read it. It wasn't like they just got it, with the email. Things were different, huh? Can you imagine that? Writing letters. I don't even think that many people ever write a letter anymore. It's all an email, or pick up the cell phone and call them. TV antenna static continued. Cable and things like that weren't extremely popular, so we still had rabbit ears, and we were always trying to move those around on the TV. They went from being on the rooftop to really doing pretty good on the TV, but you still got a lot of static until you got it just right. How about this one? Furniture in the 70s. Beanbag chairs. Okay, everybody's had a beanbag chair. You flop down in it. It was just right. It just wasn't right. You can mold and move, and then people were dragging them from one room to the other, to sit in it. And they were small ones and they were big ones. And then, of course, when they got a tear in them, styrofoam everywhere. Little balls. Nixon resigned. We had our first big Watergate, big deal in politics. President stepping down. We didn't even know why. We just knew it was important. Now, this was a good one. In the 70s, I used to go to roller skating rinks. You had the disco ball, the wood floor, the boots. They'd give you a pair of skates. I never owned my own. They'd give you a pair of rental skates, and that'd jack you up about 5 or 6 inches taller than you were. You'd get out there. They'd have men only races, couples, men ask girls, girls ask boys to skate with them, give you a chance to hold hands. The light was blinking off the floor. Nobody was shy. And if you ran into the wall because you weren't that great, you just laughed it off and kept on going. And I'll tell you something about it. I did that quite a bit. That was a big memory for me. I used to watch people, I was so envious, that could go backwards. And they knew how to use their feet to accelerate like you do when you go forward. That's the only way I was good at it. And 2 or 3 or even 4 skaters would do it in unison together, and or going forward. And they'd have that thing where they would go to the music and they would drop that knee up, at the same time. And I was like, far out, man. Cool. Look at those. Oh, man, I could get all the girls if I could move like that. But you needed another person or two to do it with you. If you did it by yourself, you were still cool. But man, when people all knew how to do the same thing, you remember that? Man, that was cool. But I went and I asked girls to skate. I jumped out there. They put the cones out, men only. They would say certain ages, to get out and do a race. And I was a young boy. I don't think I ever won one, of course. And it was always like you get going so fast, that first turn, you'd end up going wide and hit into the wall. You had to really know how to stay in that inside lane, right? Just like NASCAR. Crank windows in cars were very popular. Electric windows and AC and other, options, luxury options weren't really available. There was something about cranking that window that worked that forearm and getting that window just right while you're driving. How about those little wing windows? In the front, you had the little clip, the little silver clip. You'd open that up, you'd turn that wing window in, and if you smoked, it would ventilate the smoke out, or it could blow air in. I even had little wing window type things on my Honda Gullwing motorcycle that brought wind in on me in my upper torso behind the fairing to kind of cool me. They really worked. You don't see that on any car today. Nobody rolls their windows down. Everybody's got air conditioning. And you can make it hotter or colder, anywhere in between, to make it perfect climate. And you don't have any wind noise. So that's a time gone by. But how about when you had to reach over to the passenger side and roll up that or roll down that passenger window? It was kind of easy. You didn't have consoles. Most cars were a bench seat. Slide over if you needed to and get it done. And then when you got home or to a store and you wanted to lock your car, you roll them windows up. You had that fast motion you could do. Talking about the wing window and inventing smoking. Smoking in the 70s was everywhere. You watch these old 70s shows, they all smoke. They all smoke in offices. They smoked in the home. Even kids were buying candy smoke cigarettes. So they had a red tip on them, looked like they were lit, and you could blow on them, a little smoke would come out, but they were candy. But real cigarettes, every home had glass ashtrays on the coffee table. If it was nothing but putting mints in, but every home had ashtrays. How about the little beanbag ones, right? Smoking on airplanes. They even passed out free cigarettes. And then it changed to, if your flight is short, no smoking. We're gonna say, look, you can go that long without one, but on long flights, you could still smoke. You'd wait for the no smoking light to go out, like the seatbelt light, and then you'd fire them up. And nobody complained. You could be sitting at a restaurant having pancakes, at the bar at the diner, and the guy next to you or gal is sucking a cigarette down. Nobody said anything. Very different. Polaroid cameras came out. We talked the other day about taking film, to the what is it called? Photomat. And you'd wait a few days to see if you didn't have your thumb in the middle. You'd take 2 or 3 shots to make sure you got one right and all that. Then Polaroids came out and it was instant. But here's the thing that we all did. I don't know how these things get around, but shaking it made it work better. You'd shake it before you'd peel off that paper, remember? Oh yeah, and blow on it. It was kind of like the TV. You'd slap it. When you couldn't get the antenna right, then you'd resort to just slapping it, banging it, hitting it on the top. And it would work sometimes. Saturday morning cartoons. When I was really young, early 70s, I can remember a feeling of nothing was on TV in the morning except cartoons. There were several channels that played it. It was Bugs Bunny and all the old ones, Popeye and Roadrunner and Daffy, and I'd have to think, but I can come up with them. There were so many. I've seen them all, and they were bright, they were colorful, and they were newer style than like the old ones, like some of the old Popeye commercials that were cartoons that were black and white. These were really cool, and you have a big bowl of cereal and watch cartoons, and man, that was fun. That was fun. Hitchhiking. Hitchhiking, you used to see people just hold a sign that said west, east, north, or city. And while it was still a little risky, it wasn't, I can't tell you the last time I've seen somebody hold a thumb out. But hitchhiking was everywhere. And people could go, and I used to think about it, hey, they don't have to buy a car, they don't have to buy any gas, they can just simply hitch a ride. And you pick somebody up. Sometimes it was like, hey, where are you going? People would go out of their way to get you to your final destination, or they'll say, well, I'm going as far as so-and-so. I can give you a ride to there. And you drop them off, have a little conversation on the way. And I was never a big hitchhiker, but I have. And I got a ride. It was even after the 70s, I think. One time, quick story off the track, I had my motorcycle helmet in my hand, and my bike I had dropped off at the dealer. It was a Harley. This was in Atlanta, Georgia, and I knew it would work. And I knew didn't have a ride home, and it was a pretty good distance. But as soon as I started hitchhiking with that helmet in my hand, a fellow motorcyclist driving his truck stopped immediately, picked me up, and he thought that I was broke down, because it's something that you would do if you saw a motorcycle on the side of the road broke down. You stop and help. It's just kind of the camaraderie that goes with motorcycling, and you want to help. So he's driving his truck. I got a helmet in my hand. I got my thumb out. He takes me all the way to my house. I explained that I just dropped it off at service, had no way back. They needed to keep it, and he was so kind to do that for me. So hitchhiking used to be a way that guys with a backpack and just kind of getting out, a hippie or whatever they were, and they're just nomadic, just cruising around the country with nothing but a backpack. The dress, we were talking about that earlier, the clothing. In my opinion, folks, the 70s and 80s, especially the 70s, women were never, and part of the 80s, but in the 70s, never more attractive. They wore short shorts, tube tops. They didn't wear brasiers, bras. Really. In high school, I've actually said this to some people and they disagree with me. I'm like, I lived it. I remember. They didn't wear bras. They wore tube tops and the shorts were short. They had they had cut off jeans, which are extremely sexy, and then they had dolphin shorts. It was like a gym short, but really short, and it had a little cut on the side of their leg right there, and it accentuated a woman's figure. And if they wore some tube socks and tennis shoes, I mean, to me, attire like that, sexy attire that leaves the imagination, mini skirts when they were out in the 60s, and you see these things in the early 70s too on TVs. These are more sensual and sexy looking than any nude picture. Leave something for the imagination. Accentuate what a woman has. And they all had long hair. In the 70s, men too. Everybody. I had blonde hair to here. And it was, blonde, white blonde. I surfed every day, the sun, because I never cut it. It gets lighter. I keep it very short now, and it's turned brown for whatever reason. At least I haven't turned gray. I got a little bit. Some people even wrote in comments about a year ago that I put something in my hair. No. And what makes it actually a little darker, it actually looks a little lighter than this, is if I have gel in there. And if I don't have gel and my hair just dries, it does look more to the blonder brown than brown. But anyway, it was long. I had blow dried with the feather going back when I was in the car business. It covered my ear. I had the David Cassidy look. That's because, and that's what I'm getting to next. Do you remember? Of course we all remember. Farrah Fawcett. She was the Marilyn Monroe of the 70s and the 80s. And Farrah Fawcett's hairstyle with those feathers that flowed back with the blow dryers and the hairspray. And men did it too. They had their own version of it. But long hair was in the 70s. Women wore, and men too, they wore those bell-bottom jeans that were tight. A lot of them were, what are they called, dittos or something? They came up higher than they are on these, hip huggers that were way down. They had both, but the ones that came up higher that showed the figure on both men and women. Remember the lead singer of Led Zeppelin? That guy wore his jeans painted on. And so today it's all hanging off of you. It's all loose. It's all like down on your hamstrings, with your underwear showing. Women doing it too. And everybody's heavier. In the 70s, I do remember, of course, young people today are still in good shape. It's just because they haven't gotten big yet. They haven't aged yet. And I'm probably referring to when, what I was thinking, because I was 16 to, 19 years old when I was chasing the girls and noticing these things. But I was ripped. I was also about 160 pounds. My stomach was concave. My arms were small and skinny. I was brown from surfing, and I lived in board shorts and flip-flops. And like I said, the long blonde hair. Yeah. Wow. Times have changed, but the girls look sexier than ever. And it carried on into the 80s. And of course, that's why I refer to my little sayings I have about they wear paint. I call makeup paint. Just one of my sayings. And a woman can really change her physical face with paint. When you put the stuff on your eyebrows, the eyeliner, the eyelashes, the foundation, the lipstick, and then you get the long hair. Why not, right? Why not work with what you got, improve it if you can, and man, the women look good. I sure do miss those. They carried into the 80s too. S&H green stamps. I got on a little bit of a tangent there with the clothing. Started remembering too much. I was a rounder in those days. S&H green stamps. Everybody collected them. They didn't know why. They didn't know what you were going to get, but it was a thing to do. Everybody gave them out. You got so many of them when you went to the grocery, and you had to fill up these books and lick them and paste them, and I don't know, you had to have a whole box of them to get a toaster. I didn't collect them, but I remember my mom and others did. But I do remember the, what was the store you took it to? That S&H green stamps? You go to the, um, it was some, not like Kmart or anything. It was, it's right there. I can't say it. This is a big one. Walter Cronkite was the main one, but there were a couple of other ones that looked straight into the camera, wore the same suit and tie, and told you the news. Unbiased, just direct report. And we believed him, and it was how we got our information, aside from newspapers. It was no such thing as opinion shows. No such thing as Fox News. No such thing as CNN or MSNBC or any of the other ones that have branched off. They just sit there and have a person talking with them, and it's all choreographed, and they sit there and bounce the ideas back and forth, reading cue cards, and producers already rehearsed them, just like making a sitcom. They've already rehearsed what they're going to say and how to make it more dramatic, and let's talk about nothing but dirty laundry. Let's make stuff up. Let's exaggerate it. Let's twist the truth. We didn't have that. We just got news. Simple. Today, you know, your phone is already buzzing with information before you get out of bed, ready for you to read. Garbage. Who remembers streaking? Streaking was popular for a few years. It came out. And public nudity was something to laugh at. It wasn't, I don't know why people did it. I think I actually did once. And it's pretty scary. It really is. But you'd see them at ball games or whatever, and the cameras would turn away, but the people would watch. They certainly would. I don't know what started that, but once one did it, a few more followed for a while. What is this? Pocket projections. Pocket. What's a pocket projection? I wrote this down. Pocket protectors. Oh, pocket protectors. Remember your uncle or your dad had that leather or vinyl thing in his front pocket, made him look nerdy, had some pins in there, maybe a tire gauge or a something different, kind of a tool. People were wearing them with the button-up short sleeve shirt. Pocket protectors. Used to see quite a few guys, you know, nerdy guys, having those. I actually had a couple of them when I was selling my coupons when I first started out, my auto service stuff. I had a couple of pins in there. I didn't like leaving it open and by accident drawing an ink line on my shirt. So I'd run it down in that, and I had a tire gauge. And, you know, I could go out and raise the hood and take a look at your car for you. Let me get my tire gauge out. Here's a good one. Metal ice cube trays. You remember these things? You take them out, you try to pull that handle, and man, when the ice cube tray, when it finally broke, the dog would bark. It was so loud. And the ice cubes, half of them would bust in half. We found out that if you run water over them a little bit, that helps. And for some reason, those cubes just felt colder. But ice cube trays that were metal. Long before ice cube makers and refrigerators, see, then we went to the plastic ones that you could literally, you know, kind of twist and, you know, fill up with water. It was always a pain in the butt though, right? You know, you take several ice cubes out and you didn't know whether to put it back in the refrigerator, which most of us did because we were lazy, or go ahead and put more water in and make the tray full again. It was always a hassle. Now we buy bags of ice. We have refrigerators that make the ice. Let's get on down here. Drive-in movies. In the early 70s, I remember going to the drive-in movies. You'd pull in there, and when I was young, you know, I'd be in the back seat. My parents would go. This was before they changed it. They evolved too. They had a speaker with a wire. You had to get your car close enough. And it was this big old heavy metal speaker. And it had a hook on it. You'd hang it on the window. You'd use your crank windows. And you'd have to roll it up some so it would hang on there. And you had a little dial and you could turn up the speaker. And we'd listen to the movie through that. Later in life, later on, you could tune into your car radio to a signal that emitted right there in the drive-in where you could hear the movie through your stereo system. But I remember the old-fashioned speakers. And then, speaking of movies on TV, who remembers The Gong Show? I remember it vaguely, and you know, somebody would come out and try to do something. They would gong them if they weren't any good. People would gong them like before they even had a chance. And we would laugh, you know. How about Make Me Laugh? Remember that one? You ever play the game with somebody else? You say, all right, you got 30 seconds where you can't smile or laugh, and you try to do something to make them laugh. These were the things that we did, but it was laughter. And then kickball. That was always a fun one. We'd play it in the streets, and then someone would holler, car, and we would get to the side, and they'd say, all right, it's good. Get back in the street and kickball. All right, that's that page. We got a little bit more here. Record players and rock and roll. This is when vinyl albums were coming on the scene. We were buying really nice record players. We called the arm a tone arm, the needle a stylus, and we had a little bit of alcohol or what it was on this little brush we'd put on there and let the album go around and clean it real good so that the stylus would play the clearest music. We had big speakers that were on the floor to, you know, the wall here. They called them two-way, three-way, five-way, meaning they had that many speakers behind the screen, tweeters and subwoofers. We were learning all the lingo. But record players, from the time they began, where they're just a small, simple record player, to you know, record stereo player. And I had one. It was cool. How about Tang? You ever drank Tang? I only drank it, and you only drank it because the astronauts drank it. To me, I thought it tasted horrible. You could never get the right mixture. But we bought it because they made that commercial, and that stuck in our mind. The astronauts drank Tang. We talked about Farrah Fawcett. Riding in the back of pickups used to be a sense of freedom. Sitting on the tailgate, there was no law against it. Nobody looked at you funny. You'd wave to people, you know, as you're going down the road. You just did it. And today, I mean, that's taboo. That's just looked at like you're nuts. Mom used to write, or maybe you did, mainly your mother probably, or your father, a grocery list. Put it on the refrigerator, put it on the counter. If it was 1 item, 2 items, or 20 items, there were no apps. It was just pen and paper. And to remember what you needed, there was a grocery list. Just like writing those letters. Just what we did, you know. Now you got your phone. I use it. Actually, I tell my phone, every time I see something I need or run out of, I'll say, hey, what's her name? Add this to my shopping list. And you see me make my videos at Walmart. Sometimes I have to pause the video and go look at it because I forget what's on there. But it would be easier where I wouldn't have to stop my video to write them down. There's not that many things that I need on a darn piece of paper. It works. Shows that used to make America feel like an extension of our family. Shows like The Brady Bunch. It was a family that had all these girls and guys. I wasn't a big fan of it. I didn't hate it or anything. It was one I just didn't tune into, but I know a lot of people did. And the girls all shared one room, and the boys, I think maybe they did. And it wasn't real, but yet it felt like they were an extension to your own family. The Brady Bunch. And Charlie's Angels, that was another show that we watched. It was a little silly, but had some hot looking chicks in it, and they all wore nice fashionable clothes. It was a little bit of rebellion, and Farrah Fawcett was in it. How about this one? Maps didn't talk. Before GPS, we would buy maps. All cars had 3 or 4 of them in the car, some that folded out, some that were books. What's that main one called? Not Atlas, it was a name. Macallan, something like that. And you'd look at the map and you'd end up still getting lost, and you'd have to stop and ask for directions. And then getting back was like amazing. But there was no GPS. You had to kind of look with one eye and drive with the other, and look at your road maps. I remember having them. I think they worked great. Used to get those triptychs from AAA too, that would give you state maps. And some maps had more of an explosion, where you can get zoomed in on streets, city streets, neighborhood streets, and others were, the big highway map and that kind of thing. This is a weird one. I never bought one, but I remember them. Pet rocks. They were $3.99. You came with a box and an instruction. Didn't require any feeding or any care. And everybody bought them. A rock. Pet rocks. Funny how we'll just go for things. Mood rings, pet rocks. Street fairs, cotton candy, and all that. They'd set up not a big state fair, but they were like it. You'd go there, and man, that was fun. You try all the games, you'd lose all your money. You could never win. There was always a trick behind these carnies. You were just that further behind. You couldn't throw the ring over the Coke bottle, or you couldn't get the ball in the basket, it'd bounce out, or you shoot the BB gun and you're trying to shoot the red star out of the paper, but if the paper bent backwards and there was still a little piece of red on there, you didn't win. There's always a way to get your money, but you couldn't get that big stuffed animal. But you'd love the street fairs. They'd pop up. You couldn't wait for the next one to come. What about this? We used to carry books from school, and we had book covers, but we made them from brown paper bags. And guess what? I don't think plastic bags were even available in those days. I think it was all brown bags at the grocery store. That's why we found so many other uses for them. But we made book covers. I didn't have too many or make any because I was pretty bad about doing homework and carrying my books around. And so that kind of wraps it up. A couple of the other things that were left there I spoke of earlier because they came to mind about something else I was talking about. And I skipped the 60s, like I said, because I did watch a couple of things and I'm like, well, there's nothing really new. A few things, but not enough to make a longer video. And I was excited about getting into the time where I think you also grew up and I grew up, which was the 70s and then the 80s as a young person. We'll see what I can make up for about the 80s coming. And I even saw one on there that compares the 50s to the 20s, 2000s, of the stark differences. So there's all kinds of little videos there to do some reminiscing. We won't do too many of them, but they are fun. And when I ran across this video the other day of the 50s, even though I didn't grow up then, a lot of that stuff did carry on. And my grandmother, who lived in Alabama, that did farming when I was a real young boy, and I remember how things were very slow, very basic, and very manual. Nothing electronic, no kitchen appliances. Everything was ice cream makers, everything. Even use a horse to plow a field. They didn't even have before they could afford one anyway, a tractor. So it's just amazing, the evolution. In one person's lifespan, from 1950 and 75 years to 2025, and we're not even through the end of the year yet, of how it went kind of slow for a few decades, and then when the technology exploded and iPhones and Android phones came out and computers, you can't even keep up with it. I can't even remember yesterday. And now with AI that they're talking about by the end of this year, folks, and another decade goes by with AI and the technology they're going to have, people won't even believe that people did these things that we just talked about. There won't even be anybody around old enough to share the stories. There will be nobody that can remember that. And I'm only 66, but I can still remember, but I don't remember my grandfather's days. But I've heard the stories. They used to share them. And so I have them. And I think I'm really blessed. And I think you're really blessed if you're my age to at least see the evolution from the way things were, making homemade ice cream, up to walking into a store and having 50 choices of each product. And people are really spoiled. And cars today that drive themselves versus how it used to feel to really own a nice car, a muscle car, a steel car. Isn't it amazing? Well, let me know in the comments what you think. Let me know some of your fond memories. Let me know if you grew up in the 70s. And remember to subscribe to the channel if you like these kinds of videos. I really appreciate that. It helps me get the subscribers that I'm looking to get at 100,000 and receive my play button plaque from YouTube as a very big achievement for a lot of YouTube creators. Also, if you would like to help support my channel, I have links in the description of all the videos, plus on the home page of my video. It's called Buy Me a Coffee and Amazon. And one of those, you can support the channel by just donating some money to buy a coffee, if you'd like to buy me a coffee. And the other one is if you're an Amazon shopper and you just buy things on Amazon, if you use my link, you won't be charged an extra penny for the products that you buy on Amazon, but Jeff Bezos, the owner, will share some of the profits he's made with me to help support this channel and to bring you content. So thanks very much, folks. Until the next video, don't ever forget to always crush it.